The floor squeaks. That is the first thing I will tell you about the overnight surgical ward at Harbor General, because it is the first thing that matters to this story. The linoleum in the central corridor, from the nurse's station to Bay 6, has a section about 8 feet long that squeaks under body weight. Has done for 3 years. I have put in 4 maintenance requests. Nothing has happened. At this point it is part of the floor's personality, and I have accepted it the way you accept all things that are annoying, but not dangerous, by stopping noticing them consciously and letting them become background. Everybody who walks that corridor makes it squeak. The day nurses make it squeak. The transport staff make it squeak. Dr. Yuan from thoracic surgery, who weighs maybe 140 pounds and walks like he is trying not to disturb anyone, makes it squeak. I make it squeak. Every person who has walked that corridor in the 3 years since the linoleum started doing what it does has made it squeak. Claire never made it squeak. Not once. Not in 2 years of walking that corridor every overnight shift. She moved through that section without producing a single sound, which is not physically possible. And I know it is not physically possible. And I noticed it the 3rd week she was on the ward, and filed it in the part of my brain labeled "not right now," and kept working. That is where this story starts. Not with a dramatic event. Not with an alarm or a crash or a convoy of armed men arriving at 3 in the morning. With a section of linoleum that squeaks under everyone except her. Before this story breaks your heart and rebuilds it again, please subscribe to this channel, ring that bell, and drop a comment below telling me which town or city you're listening from tonight. I read every single one. My name is Pete Garza. I have worked the overnight surgical ward at Harbor General in San Diego for 9 years. Harbor General is 4 miles from Naval Base San Diego. We treat a lot of military patients, more than most civilian hospitals our size. The overnight staff have learned, over the years, to read the specific silences of military patients, the way they answer pain scale questions with numbers lower than the numbers their faces are giving you, the way they want the room to themselves, but do not want to be actually alone, the particular brand of stoicism that the military produces, and that is both the most impressive and the most exhausting quality to be on the receiving end of as a nurse. I say this because it matters later. I have been working Harbor General's overnight ward for 9 years. I have 2 nurses on my overnight rotation, who have been with me for most of that time. Diane, who has been here 12 years, and who I would trust with my own life, without hesitation, and Tommy, who has been here 4 years, and who is good enough that I have stopped worrying about him, which is the highest compliment I give. I know this ward the way I know my own kitchen. Every room, every supply cabinet, every monitor quirk, every patient. Claire showed up on the ward 22 months before the night of April 9th. I am going to tell you exactly how she arrived, because the arrival matters, and I want to be precise about it. She was there. That is the arrival. She was there one night when she had not been there the night before. Standing at the medication prep station with the practiced ease of someone who had been standing at that exact station for years. Pulling a supply cart with the specific authority of someone who knows which drawer has what in it, without checking. No introduction, no orientation, no handover from a day shift supervisor explaining who she was and where she had come from. She was there, and she was so competent, and the ward needed competence so badly that I did not ask. That is the honest truth of how it started. I did not ask because she was good at the job, and the job needed doing, and the overnight surgical ward at Harbor General does not have the luxury of extended onboarding conversations at 2 in the morning. I introduced myself. She told me her name was Claire. She shook my hand. Her hand was cold enough that I held it a half-second longer than a handshake requires, the way you hold something that surprises you. She gave me a small, quiet smile. She went back to the supply cart. I went back to work. Over the 22 months that followed, I cataloged her. I did not do this consciously, at least not at first. It was the same process by which any careful person accumulates knowledge about someone they work alongside regularly, the incremental building of a profile from small observations, each one filed separately, none of them alarming on its own. Together they were a different matter. The badge. She never used one. On an overnight surgical ward at a hospital with electronic access control, on every secure room and medication cabinet, this is significant. You cannot function on this floor without a badge. The medication cabinet alone requires a badge swipe and a pin. Claire accessed that cabinet every night. She never swiped a badge. She never entered a pin. I watched her do it on a Tuesday in November. Watched her open the cabinet without touching the reader. The way a person opens a cabinet whose door is already unlatched. Except the door was not unlatched. And I stood there for a moment, and then Diane called me to Bay 3, because Mr. Patterson in the post-op bed had spiked a fever, and I went. I did not go back to the cabinet thing for 3 weeks, and when I did not have a framework for it, so I filed it in the same place I had filed the corridor squeak. The food. She never ate. I am not talking about being too busy to eat, which happens, or being a light eater, which is a real thing. I am talking about 2 years, overnight shifts, during which I never once saw her consume anything. No coffee. No water. No vending machine run at 4 in the morning, when the blood sugar crashes, and even people who claim they are not hungry find themselves feeding coins into the machine. Nothing. 2 years. Nothing. The temperature. Every room she entered went cold. Not dramatically cold. Not the kind of cold that makes a patient complain, or a monitor behave differently. The kind of cold that makes you reach for your sleeves. The kind that you register for a moment, and then attribute to the HVAC system, and move on. I registered it and moved on 40 times over 22 months before I started keeping a mental note of when it happened and which rooms she had been in. The correlation was perfect. Every room. Every time. And the footprints. The footprints are the thing I keep coming back to, even now. Because a footprint is concrete. A footprint is physical evidence. A footprint is the kind of thing that cannot be rationalized as a perception error or a fatigue-induced misread or a coincidence of timing. A footprint is either there or it is not. In January, 8 months into Claire's time on the ward, we had a post-op patient in Bay 5 who was recovering from an abdominal repair. The surgery had been complicated. The night was bad. The patient was in a lot of pain, and the pain management was not quite getting on top of it. By 2 a.m., the floor of Bay 5 had been walked over by me, Diane, Tommy, the on-call physician, and the patient's wife who we had let in against protocol, because the patient had specifically asked for her and protocol can accommodate compassion when the situation warrants it. At 2:47 a.m. Claire was in Bay 5. I know she was there, because the patient's wife's wife told me afterward. She said the nurse came and sat with them. She said the nurse held her husband's hand for 20 minutes and said something she could not quite remember, but that had settled him. She gave me a description. Blonde hair. Pale blue scrubs. Very quiet voice. I checked the floor of Bay 5 at 3 a.m. after the wife went back to the waiting area. I found my footprints. Diane's, Tommy's. The physician's. The wife's sneakers. The patient's slippers from when we had helped him to the bathroom at midnight. In the area beside the bed where Claire had sat, the floor was clean. No marks. No impressions. Nothing. I stood in Bay 5 for a long time. Then I went back to the station and I charted, and I kept going. But Diane noticed before I said anything. I had not planned to say anything. I had been carrying the catalog for 8 months, and I had made a decision, without fully articulating it to myself, that the catalog was mine to carry, and that sharing it would require me to say things out loud that I was not prepared to hear myself say. Then Diane came to me on a Wednesday morning at the end of a shift and sat down across from me at the station and said, "Pete." Claire's hands. I said, "I know. They are always the same temperature. I have felt them in February and in August. They are always the same." "That is not a human temperature range." "I know," I said. She looked at me. "How long have you known?" "A while," I said. Diane is not a person who pushes past the answer she has been given when the person giving it has clearly drawn a line. She is one of the most professionally intelligent people I have ever worked with, and her intelligence includes knowing when to stop. She stopped. She said, whatever she is. She is good for this ward. Yes, I said. Then we keep going. Yes, I said. We kept going. The other thing I will tell you before April 9th is about the patients. Patients talk about Claire differently from how they talk about any other staff member. I do not mean they like her more, though they do. I mean the language they use is different. Most patients describe nursing staff in the language of what they did. She gave me my medication. She changed my dressing. He helped me to the bathroom. She explained the procedure. Functional, task-oriented, which is how care usually registers when you are the recipient of it. The patients who had been visited by Claire in the deep hours of the night described her in a different language. A 64-year-old retired police officer, post-cardiac surgery in Bay 8, he told me on his 4th morning that a nurse had come in the night and talked to him. He said, "She sat with me for about an hour. I could not sleep. I kept thinking about whether the surgery had worked, whether I was going to be the same after. She sat in the chair and she talked, and I not tell you exactly what she said, but I can tell you that when she left I was not afraid anymore, and I have not been afraid since. A 32-year-old woman, post-appendectomy in Bay 2, she said. She told me I was going to be fine. I know nurses say that, but she did not say it the way nurses say it when they mean it is going to be okay, and they are not entirely certain. She said it the way you say something you know. Like she had already seen the end of the story and was telling me the last page. A 57-year-old man, post-bowel resection, in Bay 4, he just said, the blonde nurse. She came at about 3. I went to sleep right after and I did not wake up until morning. That has not happened once since I was admitted. 3 people, 3 separate nights, 3 separate rooms, the same quality of experience. She was not just managing their clinical care. She was managing something that the clinical framework does not have a category for. Something older than the framework. I thought about this a lot in the months before April 9th. I did not reach a conclusion. April 9th reached it for me. The convoy arrived at 3 or 8 a.m. I heard the vehicles before I saw anything. The specific sound of multiple SUVs moving fast on a road built for slower traffic, pulling hard into the ambulance bay with the kind of urgency that bypasses the ordinary ambulance bay protocol entirely. I was at the nurse's station. I looked up. 5 men came through the ambulance bay doors. They were in civilian clothes, dark jackets, dark pants, but the plate carriers under the jackets were visible if you knew what to look for. And 9 years of treating military patients in San Diego means I know what to look for. They were armed. I could see the sidearms. They moved through the lobby with the specific compressed efficiency of people for whom a room is an environment to be assessed and controlled in the first 4 seconds, and who do it automatically, the way breathing is automatic. Their leader reached the nurse's station in 12 seconds. Sandy-haired, lean, a face that had been through weather and decisions and the specific consequences of decisions made in difficult conditions, and that had arranged all of this into an expression of functional calm. He put a credential on the counter. He gave me 4 seconds to look at it. I read enough. Naval Special Warfare Command. Commander Brett Walsh, he said, Cell Team 7. I need your trauma bay and your best team right now. We have a man with 2 through and through GSWs to the chest and BP in the teens. He has been field treated for 40 minutes. The window is closing. How far out? He is behind me. Walsh looked at me with the eyes of a man who has had this conversation before and knows how it goes and needs it to go faster. He is 30 seconds behind me. Tell me where to take him. Bay 1, I said. They moved. The man on the stretcher was enormous. 6'2", built like someone who had made his body into a tool over a long career of using it in demanding conditions. The field dressings on his chest were soaked through, both of them, the specific dark red of dressings that have absorbed what they can and are no longer absorbing. His color was wrong, the specific gray-white of a circulatory system that has run out of reserves and is making allocation decisions. His name was Marcus Webb. His team medic gave me the report in the clipped. Precise shorthand of someone who has delivered this kind of briefing before in worse conditions. 2 GSWs, left chest and right chest, 1 through and through, 1 retained, bilateral hemothorax suspected, BP 19 over palp on last reading, maintained on saline. 19 over palp. I have been a nurse for 14 years. I know what 19 over palp means, and I know what it usually means for the trajectory. I did not say this to Walsh. Bay 1, I said again. Let's go. Walsh followed us in. I did not have the time or the authority to stop him, and I made the split-second calculation that a man who could navigate the federal credential system and field treat a bilateral hemothorax case for 40 minutes in a moving vehicle was probably not going to make Bay 1 worse by being in it. I was right. He stood against the wall inside the door, and he was still, and he was quiet, and he watched. We worked. The code lasted 54 minutes. I have run codes that lasted longer. I have run codes that produced better outcomes. I have run codes that produced the same outcome as Marcus Webb's code appeared to be producing at 4:02 a.m., which is to say no outcome at all except the one you do not want. We did everything right. I want to say that clearly because it matters. This was not a code that failed because someone made an error or missed a window or went to the wrong intervention at the wrong time. This was a code that was failing because the damage was extensive and the blood loss was extreme, and the body of a man built the way Marcus Webb was built has a limit, and we had reached it. The monitor went flat at 4:02 a.m. The sound it makes is a sound you do not get used to. 14 years, and I have not gotten used to it. It is the sound of a conversation that has ended, the body's conversation, with everything it needed to keep going over. I looked at my team. Diane's jaw was set the way it sets when she is holding something in. Tommy had both hands on the bed rail, not pushing, just resting, the posture of someone who is not ready to step back yet. I looked at Walsh. He was very still. The kind of still that is not calm, but is something being held in place by force of will over a long habit of doing exactly that. His eyes were on the monitor. His right hand was closed into a fist at his side. I opened my mouth. The temperature in Bay 1 dropped. It was not a gradual drop. It was immediate and total, the way a temperature drops when something has removed all the warmth from a room at once rather than when warmth has simply leaked out of it. My breath was white in front of my face before I had registered that the temperature had changed. I saw Diane's breath go white, Tommy's, the combat medic by the door. Walsh's right hand opened. He looked at the wall to his left. I looked at the wall to his left. Claire stepped through it. I am going to say that again, because I need you to understand that I am not using a figure of speech. She stepped through the wall. The wall of Bay 1 is a standard hospital partition, drywall over a metal stud frame, painted the same institutional off-white as every other wall on this floor. It does not have a door in it. It does not have a gap or a hinge or any architectural feature that permits passage. It is a wall. Claire walked through it, not dramatically, not with any visible effort or any distortion of the wall or any sound. She simply passed from one side of it to the other the way you pass through a doorway, and she was in Bay 1, and she was walking toward the bed. Walsh's hand went to his sidearm. He did not draw it. He put his hand on it, and then he looked at the wall, and he looked at Claire, and he looked at the wall again, and his hand came away from the weapon in the slow, deliberate way of a man making a conscious decision not to do the thing his training has wired him to do in this exact situation. "Hold," he said. His voice was quiet. Everyone hold. His team held. Claire reached the bed. She was in her pale blue scrubs, blonde hair down around her shoulders. She did not always pin it back. This was one of the nights she wore it down. Her face carried the expression I had been watching for 22 months and had finally, in the last 60 seconds, found a name for. It was the expression of someone who is doing what they were made to do. Not peace, exactly. Certainty. She placed her hands on either side of Marcus Webb's face. Bare hands. Always bare hands. She leaned down. Her lips moved near his ear. I could not hear the words, could not hear them the way you cannot hear certain frequencies. Not because they are too quiet, but because they are not operating in a register the ear is built to receive. It arrived in the chest instead, a vibration, a quality of sound that settled somewhere under the sternum and stayed there. The monitor hitched. One blip. The specific single blip artifact that you spend your career learning to distinguish from a genuine rhythm, because the difference matters enormously and the brain desperately wants the artifact to be the rhythm. I did not call it. Then the second blip came, and the third was stronger. And by the fourth, Diane had both hands on the bed rail and her eyes were doing the thing that eyes do when they are receiving information that the brain has not yet agreed to accept, and she said, her voice completely flat, the flatness of someone reporting a fact that they cannot yet to feel. She said, Pete. He has a rhythm. I see it. It is a sinus rhythm. It is a clean sinus rhythm. His pressure, she paused. His pressure is coming up. 30/20. 40/25. It is coming up. I looked at Walsh. He was staring at the monitor with the expression of a man who has operated in environments where the impossible is sometimes just the thing that happens next and who is, right now, in exactly one of those environments. 60/30, Diane said. 70/40. He is stabilizing. I turned back to Claire. She was looking at Marcus Webb with the expression I had seen her give the patients in the middle of the night. The one that was not sentimentality and was not professional satisfaction. Older than both of those things. She reached out and very lightly, barely touching, the weight of a thought rather than a hand, brushed the hair back from his forehead. Then she straightened. She stepped back from the bed. Walsh said, in a voice that was doing significant work to remain at its normal register, "Who is she?" Nobody answered him. The surgical team arrived, paged when Webb came in, finally here, Dr. Park pushing through the bay doors with her team behind her. She went directly to the bed. She read the monitor. She read the patient. She looked at me. He has a rhythm, I said. I can see that, she said, in the tone of someone who can see something and is simultaneously in the process of deciding whether what they are seeing is real. What happened? I looked at where Claire had been standing. Bay 1 was empty. The wall she had come through was a wall, unmarked, unbroken, as though nothing had passed through it. I looked at the floor where she had stood. Nothing. In the middle of the bloody, tracked evidence of 54 minutes of a trauma code, the space beside Marcus Webb's head was completely clean. He came back. I said, Dr. Park, get him to the OR he is holding right now. She moved. They all moved. The bay cleared in 90 seconds. Walsh stayed. He looked at the wall. He looked at the floor. He looked at me. He said, tell me about the nurse. I told him everything. I told him the way I have told you, starting with the floor that squeaks and working forward through 22 months of small wrongnesses. I told him about the badge and the temperature and the footprints and the patients and what they said in the mornings. I told him about Bay 5 in January and the wife's account and the clean floor. Walsh listened the way operators listen, completely, without interrupting, the eyes of someone who is assembling rather than reacting. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he pulled out the encrypted device. He typed for 30 seconds. He waited. The screen loaded something. He looked at it for a moment in a way that was different from how he had been looking at everything else tonight. A private way, the way you look at something that costs you something to look at. He turned the screen toward me. The photograph was Claire. I do not mean it resembled her or that there were similarities, or that you could see a family resemblance if you were looking for one. I mean the photograph was Claire. The face I had been looking at for 22 months. The eyes. The specific quality of stillness. The particular way her mouth was set that was neither a smile nor its absence, but something between the two that I had never been able to fully categorize. The name at the top of the file was not Claire. Rackle Ann. It read. Petty Officer First Class, E6. Hospital Corpsman, HM. SEAL Team 7 attached medical support. Killed in an action. Ramadi, Iraq. The date was 7 years ago. I read it twice. She was ours, Walsh said. His voice was controlled in the way of someone who has spent a long time developing control and is maintaining it right now by conscious effort. She was attached to my team for 2 years. Best corpsman I have ever worked with. Any unit, any branch. She had a quality that I have only seen in 1 or 2 people in 30 years of this. She could walk into a situation that was completely out of control, and the situation would become less out of control. Not because of what she did specifically, because of what she was. He paused. We were hit in Ramadi in the early morning. IED compound 3 casualties. She went to the worst one first. Her name was Hayes. Private, 23 years old, femoral. If Rachel released the pressure she was maintaining on that wound, Hayes had 4 minutes, maybe less. He stopped. I waited. The compound was not clear, he said. We thought it was clear. It was not clear. There was a second element we had not found. They hit the medical position. He looked at the device in his hands. She was still on Hayes when they hit it. She did not stop. She kept the pressure through the whole thing, through the noise and the chaos and everything coming apart around her. When we reached her position, he stopped again. Hayes survived. She did not. The surgical ward was quiet around us. San Diego outside the high windows was doing its 4 a.m. thing, the specific dark of a coastal city that does not go fully black, because the ocean reflects the sky back at it, the ambient glow of a port that never completely stops. Marcus Webb, I said. He was the patient. He was Hayes. Walsh looked at me. Marcus was 19 when Rachel died, he said. He spent the next 14 years becoming the kind of operator he thought was worth what she gave. He re-enlisted. He did every hard school available to him. His entire career has been. Walsh stopped. He has never spoken about her to anyone on the team. But I have watched him. I know what it looks like when a person is living their life in a specific direction. He has been living his life in the direction of that morning in Ramadi for 14 years. I pulled up the administrative archive on the nurses' station terminal. I went past the current records, past the agency contractor files, into the deep historical data, the employment records from before the current HR system, the period that existed in a poorly organized back-end folder that nobody accessed, because everything relevant was in the current system. I searched. It took 6 minutes. The record loaded as a scanned PDF. An old staff photograph, the format from before the 2011 renovation, the badge design that I recognized from the framed historical photos in the administration corridor. I said, Commander Walsh, look at this. He looked. Dawson, Rackle AN, the record read. RN, BSN, Harbor General Hospital. Surgical ward. Overnight rotation. Employment date spanning 3 years. Starting date 4 years before she enlisted. Ending date, the week she left for the Navy. She worked here, I said. She worked this exact ward for 3 years. She knew every room. She knew the supply cabinet that sticks on the left side and needs a specific angle to open. She knew that the monitor in Bay 4 runs slow. She knew the floor that does not squeak. I paused. This was her floor before the Navy. And when she died, she came back to the only 2 places she had ever known how to save lives. Walsh looked at the photograph for a long time. She was on a base in Iraq, he said quietly, and she was here. The same nights. I cannot tell you that, I said. I can tell you she was here. 2 years of here. And I can tell you I stopped. She knew Marcus was coming. Whatever she knew, however she knew it, she was ready. She was at bed before the monitor flatlined. Walsh closed the device. He looked at the wall she had come through. She didn't leave him, he said. It was not a question. 7 years. She did not leave him. No, I said. He nodded once, slowly, the nod of a man receiving information he has known was true from the moment he walked into Bay 1 and felt the temperature drop. The surgery lasted 2 hours and 40 minutes. Dr. Park came out at 5:34 a.m. and found Walsh and me in the corridor outside the OR, and she said, "He is alive." I do not entirely know why he is alive. The degree of hemothorax I found should have produced outcomes I am not going to describe to either of you right now. But he is alive and the repairs held and his vitals are better than they have any right to be. She looked at Walsh. she said. Whatever happened in Bay 1 before I got there. It bought him the window I needed. Tell whoever did it that it was the right call. Walsh looked at me. I did not say anything. Park went back to her patient. They moved Marcus Webb to a secured recovery room on the surgical ward at 5:50 a.m. Glass walls, Walsh's request, 2 of his team outside the door at all times. Marcus was sedated. He would stay sedated until the anesthetic cleared, which was several hours away. Walsh and I stood in the corridor outside the glass with the bad coffee that the ward machine produces and that nobody drinks for the quality of the coffee. His team were distributed along the corridor in the relaxed but present posture of people who are down from maximum readiness, but are not done. He carries intelligence, Walsh said, in the way of someone saying the thing they are supposed to say rather than the thing they are thinking. The reason we were running him in the first place. What he has will close networks that have been operational for years. People will be alive because he lived tonight, and because she saved him, I said. Again, Walsh said. The ward outside Marcus's room was doing its 5 a.m. thing, the specific hinge of an overnight ward beginning its turn toward morning, the quality of the air changing as the deep hours give way to the approaching shift change. I know this hinge. I have been inside it for 9 years. I know what it sounds like and what it feels like, and the specific way the light in the corridor seems to hold for a moment before it decides what it is going to be next. The temperature dropped, different from the drop in Bay 1. Bay 1 was sudden. An arrival. This was slower, heavier. The cold of something that has been held for a very long time and is setting itself down. The cold of a thing reaching its end. My breath was white in the air. Walsh's was too. His teams, one by one down the corridor. The frost came. It spread across the glass wall of Marcus Webb's room from the upper right corner, slowly, in the specific branching pattern of frost on a winter window, each crystal catching the corridor light and returning it differently. It spread across the glass the way a message spreads across a page. Deliberate. Complete. Walsh's hand went toward his weapon. He stopped himself. He said, "Stand down. All of you, weapons down. That is a direct order, and I will not give it twice." The hands came away from the weapons. At the far end of the corridor, near the window that faced east, where the San Diego dark was beginning its first surrender to the morning, the shadows moved. Clare walked out of them. Pale blue scrubs, blonde hair loose. The face I had been looking at for 22 months carrying, for the first time since I had known her, something I had not seen in it before. The sorrow was gone. The ancient, specific weight that had lived behind her eyes every night of every shift for as long as I had known her, gone. What was there instead was lighter, not happiness exactly. Something older than happiness. Release. She walked down the center of the corridor. She did not look at me or at Walsh or at any of the men along the walls. Her eyes were on the glass room at the end, on the man inside it. The glass door opened as she reached it. No one touched it. She stepped inside. Walsh and I crossed to the glass. We cleared small circles in the frost with the flats of our hands and looked through. Marcus Webb was awake. He should not have been awake. The anesthetic timeline was clear, and the anesthetic timeline said several more hours. He was awake, and his eyes were open and focused, and they were fixed on the woman standing at his bedside with the specific, unambiguous focus of someone who is not confused about what they are seeing. He looked the way I have seen patients look when someone they love walks into the room after a long time away. Not surprised. Relieved. The tears came without preamble. They pooled and ran, and he did not make any effort to stop them, which told me something about the quality of this man's relief, that it exceeded his considerable capacity for professional composure entirely. Clare stood beside the bed. She did not sit. She stood the way she always stood at a patient's bedside, upright, unhurried, entirely present. She raised her hand above his face, not quite touching, hovering. The gesture of someone who is bearing witness, rather than intervening. The work was done. This was something else. I read her lips through the frosted glass. She said, "My watch is over, Marcus. You made it mean something. Everything I gave, you made it mean something. His mouth moved. His jaw was trembling. The words came out in parts, with the specific effortfulness of a man who is trying to speak something that is not quite compatible with speech. He said, "I'm sorry it took me so long to find you." She gave him the smile I had seen 2 years of, the quiet one, the private one. But something in it was different now. The weight behind it was gone. She looked unburdened in the specific way of someone who has put down something they have been carrying for a very long time, and whose body is still adjusting to the absence of the weight. She looked free. She turned from the bed. She walked back to the door. She stepped out into the corridor. Walsh moved. He squared his shoulders, both heels together, the sound echoing down the corridor with the sharp, precise crack of a man who has been doing this for 30 years, and who means every millimeter of it. He drew himself up. His right hand rose. The salute was not a gesture. It was a statement. His eyes were straight ahead. His face was doing the work of a man holding himself together for the purpose of being exactly correct in this moment, not for his own dignity, for hers. He said, "Detail." The word carried down the corridor and landed. "Attention." 4 operators came to attention. Simultaneously, the snap of it precise and immediate and total, the bodies of men who have been trained to move as one unit moving as one unit. Present arms. 4 right hands rose. In perfect unison. The salute of men who understand the full weight of the gesture, and are giving it at full weight. I stood completely still. I am not military. I have no training in this. I have no standing in it. But I understood what I was watching. 4 SEAL operators and their commander, in a hospital corridor in San Diego at 5:53 in the morning, raising their hands to a woman who had been dead for 7 years, and who had kept her post for every one of those 7 years, because keeping her post was the only thing that had ever been possible for her. Claire walked down the corridor. She passed Walsh. She passed his team. She did not stop. She did not look at any of them. Her eyes were on the window at the end of the hall. But as she passed Walsh, the man who had commanded her, the man who had watched her keep pressure on a wound in a compound that was not clear, the man who had carried whatever he carried since Ramadi for 7 years, she turned her head. Just slightly, she looked at him, and she raised her hand. The salute she returned was exact. The angle of the elbow, the geometry of the hand, the duration. Not an approximation. Not a civilian doing their best impression. The salute of a petty officer, first class, returning the salute of her commanding officer. Precise and complete and final. Walsh's jaw moved once. She turned back to the window. The first light of a San Diego April morning was coming through it. San Diego does mornings better than almost any city I know. The specific quality of a Pacific coastal dawn. The light arriving, not as a statement, but as a reminder. A patient return of something that was always going to come back. It hit the glass. It hit the corridor wall. It hit the pale blue of her scrubs. She walked into it. There was no flash. No sound. No theatrical effect. She walked into the morning light the way you walk into a room you have been away from for a long time and are very glad to return to. And the light received her, and she became part of it, and the corridor at the end, where she had been, was filled with light and nothing else. The frost on the glass melted, all at once, gone. The temperature returned to normal. The specific weight that had been sitting on this ward since 3:08 a.m., the dense, present, ancient weight of something enormous occupying a space it should not have occupied, lifted. And the ward was just the ward again. The monitors, the corridor lights, the bad coffee machine. Walsh lowered his hand. His team followed. Nobody spoke for a long time. Then Walsh said, very quietly, to the empty corridor, to the window, to whatever was on the other side of the morning light, "Petty Officer Dawson, well done. You are dismissed." The convoy left Harbor General at 7:20 a.m. Marcus Webb went with them. A military medical transport, Walter Reed the destination, Walsh in the vehicle ahead. He would recover. Dr. Park's prognosis was guarded but specific, guarded about the timeline, specific about the outcome, which was that he was going to live. Walsh stopped in the corridor before he left. He looked at me for a moment. He said, "The intelligence Marcus carries will close two networks that have been running for years. What happens downstream of that, what does not happen, because of what he knows, the number of people is not small," I said. "And because she saved him," he said. Again, "Yes. Because she saved him." Again, he paused. "She saved him the first time from the inside of a situation that was going wrong. She saved him the second time from wherever she was between then and now." He looked down the corridor toward the window where she had dissolved. "She never stopped being on his team. 7 years and she never stopped." He looked at me. "Thank you," he said, "for whatever you did to this floor that made it the kind of place she would come back to." I did not know what to say to that. He nodded once. He walked out. The day shift arrived at 7:30. Sandra Cho, day charge nurse, 11 years at Harbor General, came through the ward doors with her coffee and her reading glasses on top of her head, and the expression of someone who is ready for the shift they know they are about to have. She looked at me. She said, "Hard night?" I said, "Some of it." She looked at the corridor, at the window at the end, at the ward doing its ordinary morning. "Claire," she said. I looked at her. "I found her name in the archive," Sandra said, 6 months ago. "I was looking for old supply order records, and I found the staff file. Rachel Dawson. She worked this ward before she enlisted." A pause. "I have been watching the handover notes for 2 years. I recognized the description the day the first one came through." I stared at her. "You knew," I said. "I knew enough," she said carefully. "I knew she had worked here. I knew she had died. I knew the handover notes described someone who was making this ward better." She looked at the window. "I decided that whatever she was in the right place. And I decided the right thing to do was let her be in the right place, and not make it complicated." We stood in the corridor for a moment. "She's gone," I said. "For good, she's done." Sandra absorbed this. "Good," she said finally. Not unkindly. With the specific meaning of good, that means right. That means correct. That means the thing that was supposed to happen has happened. She earned it. She went to the charge desk. She picked up the shift board. She began the day. The overnight surgical ward at Harbor General returned to what it was. No cold rooms. No silent footsteps on the section of corridor that squeaks for everyone else. No patients in the morning describing the blonde nurse who had come at 3 and said the thing they could not quite remember, but that had made the fear stop. No clean floor in the space beside the bed where the evidence of everyone else's presence was visible and hers was not. She was gone. And the ward did not collapse without her. The ward ran. Diane ran her rooms the way she had always run them. Tommy got better, which he does, which is a quality of Tommy that I find consistently reassuring. I ran my nights. Dark Park ran her ORs. Harbor General processed what it processed, and the city fed it what the city fed it, and the floor kept going. But she had changed it, not by haunting it, by inhabiting it. By caring about the patients in it with a completeness that had made the caring part of the floor's identity, had laid it into the culture of the ward, the way certain values get laid into certain places by the people who practice them first. The way she had sat with people at 3 in the morning had become the way we sat with people at 3 in the morning, not by copying her, but by being in her company long enough that the standard rose and then stayed risen. New staff ask about the ward's reputation. Patients from Harbor General's surgical ward are unusually calm in the post-op period. They rate their overnight nursing care higher than patients at comparable wards in comparable facilities. This has been true for 2 years. Hospital administration considers it a function of staff quality. They are right. They are just not right about which staff member set the bar. I got a letter from Walsh 4 months after April 9th. Not an email. A letter handwritten on plain paper. The handwriting of a man who did not go to school for handwriting but did go to school for saying the necessary thing and nothing else. He said Marcus was recovering well. He said the intelligence had produced results he was not at liberty to describe, but that the description would have pleased her. He said the team had held a memorial service, a private one, no ceremony, just Walsh and his operators at a specific location that he did not name. He said they had said things that had needed to be said for 7 years. He said it helped. He said, "I have been doing this work for a long time. I have known people who were extraordinary at it. Rachel Dawson was the best I have ever seen at keeping a person alive who should not have survived. I have spent 7 years not being able to say that to anyone who would understand what it meant. I am saying it to you because you were there. You saw it. You know what it means." He said, "Thank you for taking care of the floor she loved." I folded the letter. I keep it in the top drawer of my desk at the ward station. I keep it there because some things need to be kept close. Some things need to be in reach on the nights when the work is very hard and the floor is very quiet, and the monitor in Bay 3 is doing the thing it does between 3 and 4 a.m. that has always sounded, in the specific auditory imagination of a nurse in the deep overnight hours, slightly like footsteps. I still work nights. 9 years has become 11. The floor still squeaks in the central corridor section. 3 more maintenance requests and still nothing. I have given up submitting them. It is part of the floor's personality. Everyone who walks that section makes it squeak. I notice this every night. 11 years and I notice it every night, because noticing it is the thing I do now in that section of corridor, and the reason I notice it is specific, and the reason is not going to change. She never made it squeak. She walked this floor for 22 months, and never made that section of corridor make a sound, and I kept working alongside her and telling myself the catalog of small wrongnesses was something I did not have a framework for, and then April 9th gave me the framework. I understand now what she was. I understand why her hands were cold and why the rooms went cold when she entered them and why she never ate and why the camera did not see her and why the floor beside her patients' beds was always clean. I understand all of it. What I understand most is this. Rachel Dawson was a nurse on this ward for 3 years. She left to become something else, something harder and more dangerous, and that asked more of her than any ward ever would. And when that thing asked everything, and she gave everything, she came back to this floor. To the rooms and the bays and the patients and the 3 a.m. fear that she had spent 3 years learning how to sit with. She came back because this was her work. Not was, is. The work does not stop because the person doing it dies. The work is still there. The patients are still afraid at 3 in the morning. The ward still needs someone who will walk the corridor without needing to be scheduled and sit beside the bed, without needing to be asked, and say the thing that makes the fear smaller. She was that person. She was it for 3 years when she was alive, and she was it for 7 years after, and she was it until the night Marcus Webb came back, and she finished what she had started in Ramadi and walked into the San Diego morning and was done. I worked the overnight surgical ward. On the nights when a code is going badly, when the monitor is saying the thing I do not want it to say, and the team is at the edge of what we have, and the patient is at the edge of what they have, I do what I have done since April 9th. I look at the wall. She never comes back through it. Her watch is over, and she earned what comes after a watch like that. But I look, because some floors carry the people who loved them in the walls and the floor, and the squeak of the linoleum, and the cold of the air when the HVAC kicks at 3 a.m. Because Rachel Dawson walked this ward for a decade, counting the 2 lives in one, and the ward knows it even if the floor plan does not. Because the best nurse I ever worked with was a ghost, and I would work alongside her again, without hesitation, every night, for as long as the ward needed her. And I know, somewhere in the part of me that has done this long enough to have stopped being surprised by the things that cannot be explained, that she knows that too. If you love this type of intense nurse-taking action tales, hit that like button, share the video with your fellow thrill seekers, subscribe to our channel, and ring the bell so you never miss a new story.